was 12, and I had become too cool to care about Santa or racing to find presents under the Christmas tree at dawn. In fact, I'd become too cool for most things. I liked Atari, Led Zeppelin, and being left alone. I was a delight. Now, I'm from Illinois, where our winters are cold and gray and miserable. But from an early age, I heard fairy tales of this wonderland where people would frolic on sunny beaches in December, a magical place called Florida. But only fancy people went to Florida. Our family joke was that after he finished delivering presents, Santa actually took his Christmas vacation in Florida. And this year, we were fancy. My parents were taking us to Christmas vacation in Florida. The first thing we did was go to a beach. It was my first beach. The first time I dipped my toes in an ocean. The first time I dug my toes into sand. And I hated it. I got sunburned, had to start smearing myself with that gelatinous muck that we called sunscreen in the 80s. And when I tried to make a sandcastle, I kept digging up clams. Now, I'll abide them in a chowder, but in the wild? Ugh. And the sand got everywhere on my body. Everywhere. So I made sure my whole family knew how much I hated the beach, because I was a delight. This did not feel like a fancy vacation to me. It felt like we had traded our house for one tiny motel room where the beds were like inches apart and we were all on top of each other all the time. And my parents kept wanting to go mini golfing or shopping or sightseeing. It's like, why were they so obsessed with us all spending time together as a family? And there was nowhere in this motel room for a Christmas tree, but my mother took our ice bucket and turned it upside down and sprinkled it with some tinsel she got from the gift shop. And instead of a star on top, we had a plastic dolphin figurine. This did not feel much like Christmas. Not that I cared, because I was too cool for Christmas. However, our motel had one thing, it was a pool. And I loved pools. I mean, we had these back in Illinois, but you only used them in like July, basically. And this pool had no clams, it had no sand, and if I held my breath and dove to the bottom, there was no family around me all up in my business. So I started living at this pool. But every evening, near sunset, my parents would declare it was time for a family walk on the beach. But I hated the stupid beach, and I was sick of family time, and sunsets are lame. So I would stay back in the room, and my parents and sister would tell me I didn't know what I was missing, and off they'd go. And every night they'd come back from their beach stroll, laughing and showing each other the beautiful seashells they had found. It was so dumb. The next thing I knew was Christmas morning, and when we woke, my sister and I found our presents under the Christmas ice bucket. Now, this was 1982, and the two coolest things on earth were the Atari gaming system and the film E.T. And my Christmas gift was an E.T. the video game Atari cartridge. Yeah, I was 12 and I knew everything, but there was nothing I was more certain of than the fact that E.T. the video game was certainly going to be the greatest video game of all time. It is now remembered in history as the worst video game of all time. So maybe I didn't know everything back when I was 12, but on that Christmas morning, I couldn't wait to play it. To my shock and horror, however, it hadn't even occurred to my mother to pack the heavy Atari and all of its cables into one of our two suitcases. To be more accurate, it hadn't occurred to her that I would expect her to do that. So I was gonna have to wait until we got all the way back home to play the greatest video game of all time. Meanwhile, my sister got to pop her new Duran Duran cassette right into her Walkman right there. I felt cheated, and I was a delight about it. So I stormed off to the pool, but when the sun got low, my mother announced it was time for the sunset walk on the beach. And because it was Christmas, and this was our last night in Florida, I would not be allowed to stay back. I had to go with. I threw myself on the sand in protest, and they just ignored me. I'm sure they didn't actually skip down the beach holding hands, but that's how I remember it in my mind. And they all started like oohing and eyeing about all the beautiful seashells. They passed a driftwood log, and my sister said, "Hello, George!" And my parents laughed, because apparently this was some inside joke from their super cool walks on the beach. So the setting sun was in front of us, and all of that sunlight mixed with a week's worth of chlorine that my eyeballs had been soaking up. And my eyes started to sting and burn. And pretty soon it hurt so much I couldn't even open them. Now my father threw his beach towel over my head to try to make it darker for me. And they started leading me down the beach, like this hooded figure headed to the gallows. Also, I was a chubby kid in a 1980s swimsuit. So my thighs rubbed against each other with each step. And as you know, there was sand everywhere. It rubbed my thighs raw, and I started hobbling bow-legged. I was this like hooded, red, shuffling blob. It was like my parents were walking their pet crab. So even they got sick of it. They gave up, and they just like sat me down on the beach and said, we'll get you when we come back. I pulled the towel off my head, and I just pouted. I wished I was anywhere but this stupid beach. Now, I could only really make out like shapes and colors. I couldn't really see much, but there was a figure walking towards me on the beach. It was this pale blur in like a red swim trunks. He asked if I was okay, and I explained my eyes hurt. My parents left me here, but they were going to be back. And he shook his head and said, "What a shame. And on of all days, Christmas." He said at least I had a lovely beach to sit on. And I told him I hated the beach because sand sucks. And this stranger laughed. To the blurry haze, just like it started to shake, and his belly seemed to jiggle like a bowl of, I don't know, jelly or something. The stranger said he loved going for walks at sunset. He asked if my family did that very often. But the way he asked it, it almost felt like he knew I hadn't been going with them. It was almost like he knew when I had been bad or good, and I hadn't been good, for goodness sake. So the stranger said he had come over because he was worried that I was lonely, but now he was sure I would be okay because soon I would be with my family on Christmas. And that made me think about my family. I knew that they were going to come back from this walk laughing and sharing their shells like they did every night. I thought about that stupid ice bucket. We were so far from our house, but my mother was trying so hard to make it feel like home. My family was having a lovely trip, and I had been acting too cool for it. They weren't ruining my Christmas vacation. I was. And the stranger was right. I was lonely. So for the first time on this whole trip, I wished my family was with me. And then the stranger left me, and I heard him say, as he walked off in the night, "Merry Christmas to all, and good luck with your sight." Now, when my family got back, I jumped up to join them, and I was still walking like a crab, but now I was a happy crab, because we were a family together. And I spotted the driftwood, and I shouted, "Hello, George," and my whole family laughed with me. My mother said, "Let's get ice cream. Nobody can have ice cream in December in Illinois." The Florida sand was still under my toes, but it felt like Christmas, and it was a delight. Now, my parents had noticed that my mood had improved so much, and I told them about the stranger who had checked on me, and my sister blurted out, "Maybe it was Santa Claus on his Christmas vacation." And we laughed and laughed and laughed, because that's crazy, right? Truth is, my vision was so blurry that night, I don't know what I saw. That uncertainty let this preteen punk, who thought he knew everything, let his guard down just enough to realize that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't too cool to care about Santa. And maybe he's still not. Thank you.
Who's got a beard that's long and white?